In this video, we're going to be performing operations on functions. In the first set of examples, f of x is equal to 3x plus 5, and g of x is equal to x squared minus 1. And in each of these examples, we're going to take a look at the domain. In A, we want f of x plus g of x. So in this case, f of x is 3x plus 5 plus g of x, which was x squared minus 1. So we get x squared plus 3x, and then we have 5 minus 1 is 4. And the domain would be all real numbers, or negative infinity to infinity. In f of x minus g of x, we have 3x plus 5, but now we have minus, so I'm going to put minus and put g of x in parentheses so I don't forget to distribute that negative. And now we have negative x squared, and we have plus 3x, and now we have 5 minus a negative 1 is plus 6. And again, we have a domain of negative infinity to infinity. In c of x, they want us to multiply f of x times g of x. So we have 3x plus 5 times x squared minus 1. And if we multiply this out, we get 3x cubed minus 3x plus 5x squared minus 5. And here we have a cubic function, and again, negative infinity to infinity on the domain. And now for f of x divided by g of x, this is equal to 3x plus 5 divided by x squared minus 1. So now we have a rational function. In our rational function, the domain is everywhere except for the x values that make the denominator equal to 0. And if we set x squared minus 1 equal to 0 and solve, we get x is equal to plus and minus 1. So our domain is negative infinity to negative 1 union negative 1 to 1 union 1 to infinity. In the next example, f of x is equal to the square root of 4 minus x, and g of x is equal to 1 over x plus 1. So the domain of f of x is everywhere where 4 minus x is non-negative. So we would have 4 minus x has to be greater than 0, greater than or equal to 0. So x has to be less than or equal to 4. And so our domain here of f of x would be negative infinity to 4. And the domain of g of x is all real numbers except for negative 1. So we would have negative infinity to negative 1 union negative 1 to infinity. And now in A, we have f of x plus g of x. So we have the square root of 4 minus x plus 1 over x plus 1. So now we added the two functions together. We need to combine their two domains. So if we look at the first domain, negative infinity to 4, including 4, and then we just have to exclude the negative 1. So here the domain is going to be negative infinity to negative 1 union negative 1 to 4. For f of x minus g of x, we have the square root of 4 minus x minus 1 over x plus 1, and the domain is the same. F of x times g of x, now we have the square root of 4 minus x times 1 over x plus 1, and this is equal to the square root of 4 minus x over x plus 1, and the domain again is the same. And in D, we have f of x divided by g of x. So the square root of 4 minus x divided by 1 over x plus 1. And remember, when we have Fraction over fraction, which we could write the square root of 4 minus x as the square root of 4 minus x over 1. Then we multiply by the reciprocal, so this is equal to the square root of 4 minus x times x plus 1. And here, the domain would be negative infinity to 4. So the only thing different is that we can include negative 1, because if we had negative 1 here, the output would just be 0. And that's all for this video on performing operations on functions.